Rav Shagar has this really interesting kind of idea about his attraction towards the Mesorati Jew, which is loosely translated as traditional Jew, and he thinks that there is something very, very authentic to Judaism about the Mesorati Jew as opposed to the classic Orthodox Jew. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about like what is the Mesorati Jew for Rav Shagar and why is he attracted to it?
For Rav Shagar, the Mesorati Jew is someone who's Jewish because he's Jewish. And that really explains what is Rav Shagar's attraction to it, which is that on the whole, through a variety of topics, Rav Shagar is very interested in the idea of being Jewish because it's who you are. In the specific version that takes in the Mesorati Jew, it's someone who's very rooted in their family life. And that's what it means for them to be Jewish, is to be participating in their family and the dynamics and practices of their family, both now and in the previous generations, which isn't necessarily a historical statement. It's about how that person sees themselves. And their connection to Judaism is not about, commands. It's about what do we do as a people and a family. And Rav Shagar even quotes Rav Amital about the specific foods of the Shabbat table that are part of what it means to be Jewish. And that connection to home life, even disconnected from the mitzvot, is very important for Rav Shagar. The mitzvot actually get shifted from a framework of commandments to being part of what it means to partake in this family and national culture. So the same way foods are part of that culture.
Well, let me add a little bit to what you're saying. About like the family being one of the kind of true definitions of what it means to be Mesorati Jew for Rav Shagar. I guess, I grew up in Australia, and there really isn't a secular type of Jew in Australia. You're either, Orthodox. There's like a very small kind of Reform sect there. So you're either Orthodox or traditional. And the traditional Jew, which is what I grew up in, you pray Shagar every morning at school. Is it because Hashem commanded you? No, but that's what a Jew does. You pray Shagar, you put tefillin on every day. I remember we would do Kiddush on Friday night, not because it's a mitzvah from the Torah, but because that's what a Jew does. On Friday night, you do Kiddush together. But what's interesting about Rav Shagar is he's very aware of the faults of the Mesorati Jew, which he points out is they obviously aren't going to be as strict with halakha, and he says it's almost like that's the mechir, the price that you have to pay, but maybe it's worth it. It's like a very interesting thing, like over-intellectualizing Judaism and learning all of your relationship to halakha through the Mishnah Berurah, in some ways alienates you from the halakha because it comes about as, this book is the one who's telling you what to do, as opposed to it's who I am. So maybe you could talk a little bit about like the prices, or kind of like what's like the yitronot, the benefits of being a Mesorati Jew for Rav Shagar, and also like what does he see as obviously the faults of the Mesorati Jew?
Actually, I think really one of the phenomenal things about Rav Shagar is he's always very aware of the pluses and minuses of any given idea. It's hard to find an idea that he doesn't think has like some faults, or some downsides. When it comes to the Mesorati, it's a question of, what kind of Jew does it shape? The idea of being Mesorati, of being Jewish because it's who I am and who my family is and my tradition. And because it's not a sort of posture of obeying the law and, looking in the book to find the checklist of things I have to do, then you miss things on the checklist. Because, you're not so busy worrying about it. Rav Shagar has, I think, a very powerful statement published in the English as in the Maggid volume of Halacha as a Way of Life, where he talks about like different types of Judaism and the different Jews they create. And so he says when he critiques other Judaisms, it's because they don't create the kind of Jews that he's used to seeing and he likes seeing. So that Mesorati Jew for Rav Shagar is something so incredibly powerful about it. At the same time, does not create the same kind of, going to yeshiva, dati lumi Jew that Rav Shagar would really like to see, because it's who he's used to seeing.
You're saying there's like a part of the Mesorati Jew that he's very attracted to, but on the other hand, he himself doesn't identify totally with it.
Right. He is very attracted to the idea of Judaism rooted in the family.
Zehut.
And he very much thinks that the Dati Leumi community needs to work hard to introduce that element into what it means to be Dati Leumi, but he doesn't wholesale want to become Mesorati.
I guess I want to clarify it really for anybody who's listening. For Rav Shagar, the Mesorati Jew, when he does Shabbat, it couldn't be from an external place, because he's not learning books that told him to do Shabbat. He might have seen it in a book, but it's obvious for him that this is the way his family, does Saturday. They wake up in the morning, they go to the Beit Knesset, then they come home and do Kiddush. In other words, it's so a part of their essence that there's no... He's like, you don't have to matzik yourself. You don't have to justify why you're doing it. It's so part of who I am. And I think for Rav Shagar, he's always returning to this idea of, I don't want my connection to God, to my life, to be about justifying it towards other people, even towards myself. So he's very excited by a Jewish attitude that it's just a natural expression of who I am, not even as an individual, but as my family, as my history. So that's a really amazing thing for the Mesorati Jew. He never has to compare himself to other people because it's who he is. Another thing, I think, which is interesting about the Mesorati Jew for Rav Shagar, is that he takes this pasuk, Asher bachabanu mikol ha'amim, Hashem chose us from all the nations, and he says the Mesorati Jew would take the first half. Hashem chose us. In other words, you feel so special to be Jewish. You feel so, it's such a rich life. Chagim, festivals, mitzvot. There's just endless meaning in my life to be Jewish. And it's not about mikol ha'amim, that, I'm better than another religion, why Judaism and not Christianity. There's none of that type of discussion for a person who's being Jewish, because that's who they are. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that pasuk and how Rav Shagar interprets it.
Well, yeah. So interestingly, as much as Rav Shagar does not identify entirely with the Mesorati form of Judaism, he clearly does when it comes to that pasuk and that understanding of Jewish chosenness, because he talks about it elsewhere, outside of the context of Mesorati Jews. What it means to be chosen is to be selected as ourselves, not as opposed to anyone else. That the distinction between Jews and other people isn't a function of, we're not other people. It's that we're Jews, and by definition, there are people who aren't Jews. He talks about it in terms of this broader idea he has of the she'erit, the thing that's totally sort of separate, that it's almost its own opposite. It's other unto itself. It's just so separate that it's not even differentiated from other things. It just exists entirely in isolation. That you think Jews shouldn't define themselves negatively against other people. I'm not them, I'm a Jew. And just try and figure out what that means. And going back to the Mesorati, he sees that happening there. The Mesorati Jew for Rav Shagar is so anchored in the family and the nation and the culture and Jewishness that he's not busy defining himself as, Jewish but not Western, Jewish but not secular, etc. He's not even really super busy defining the specifics of Judaism. He's just busy being Jewish.